Okay. Hello, everyone. We're just going to wait for everyone to join. We have many people signed up, so we'll give it a couple minutes. For those of you just joining, welcome to our latest webinar in our new CX series, How to Reimagine Loyalty in the Data Age. We're just waiting for everyone to come in, so we'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started. Okay, people are starting to roll in from all over the world. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited to present our new webinar of the year, our first webinar of the year, the last webinar of the year in our new CX series, How to Reimagine Loyalty in the Data Age. We're very excited to bring our own founder and CEO, Hossein Renama, who will be hosting a special panel with Dana Rosenberg, Senior Vice President of Issuer Loyalty at Mastercard, and Katie Boschart, Senior Vice President of Enterprise Customer Engagement Platform at TD Bank. Thank you all for joining us. The webinar itself will be about 35 to 40 minutes. During the time, you can feel free to pop any questions you have in the Q&A at the bottom, and we're going to spend about 15 minutes to go over them. So with that, I will kick it off to Hossein and the rest of you to introduce yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janine, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to have Dana and Katie joining me in today's webinar. Both of them are global leaders in their industries, working on some amazing projects when it comes to developing customer engagement and experience design for their customers. I will let them to introduce themselves and telling you a little bit more about what they do at Mastercard and TD. And then I will proceed with about 4 questions, allowing us to have a good interactive and informal conversation with the hope that it gives you an idea that how these two global leaders are really changing the face of loyalty and customer engagement and cards in the post-COVID economy and in the data age. So with that, maybe I can pass it on to Katie at TD to introduce herself. Katie, please go ahead.
Thanks, Hossein. Really glad to be here. I'm Katie Boschart. I'm the Senior Vice President for Customer Engagement Platforms at TD. Prior to this role, I was leading the Canadian cards business and had the opportunity to lead a number of business lines at TD over the past 14 years. I've got about 28 years experience in financial services, mostly in the cards payment space. So loyalty is very near and dear to my heart, as well as finding ways to create really relevant value for customers. And I'm excited about this conversation because we've definitely seen some changes in the trends and customer behaviors that have accelerated because of the pandemic. And I'm happy to talk about what we've been doing in that space for TD.
Thank you, Katie. And Dana.
Hi, thanks Hussein for having me. Excited to be here to speak with both of you as well as everyone else in the webinar. I'm Dana Rosenberg. I'm the Senior Vice President of Cardholder Services, which is within our issuer loyalty group. And so have responsibility working with our regions and markets for all the benefits that are on the cards that we provide to our issuers and to our cardholders. And similar to Katie, I have significant experience in the world of loyalty, but I am relatively new to the payment space, having joined Mastercard in 2019. The majority of my loyalty background actually comes from being at Starwood Hotels, where I led global partnerships and sponsorships for many years there, and have previous experience as a strategy consultant, working in educational nonprofit, and then being a brand manager at a large global CPG company. So a little bit of a different line than Katie, but one that definitely goes deep into customer experience, the role of loyalty, and as I call it, winning over minds and hearts.
Amazing. Thanks to both of you for joining us today. When I look at your organizations and your teams, you're truly leading some very interesting initiatives that have global impacts. TD just became the best digital bank in North America. Mastercard is a dream partner for any fintech organizations, truly a global leader when it comes to payments and loyalty. When you think about this post-COVID economy and the role of cards and the role of loyalty programs, how do you foresee the future? I mean, yes, cards may be a utility helping us to pay things. Points were kind of these very structural, procedural instruments that we use to collect, but it's changing, and there are huge opportunities out there to really use these instruments to make the lives of your customers better. I'm curious that you share some of the trends that you see in the market and how you are really helping your organizations to maintain its leadership in the market. Maybe we can start with you, Katie.
Yeah, we've actually observed a number of trends that started pre-pandemic, like I said, where customers were really looking beyond points and thinking about how do we create really relevant and personalized experiences for customers at point of sale. My view is your credit card is a means to an end from a customer's perspective, and they're trying to accomplish what they want to accomplish at point of sale in that purchase. But there's a tremendous amount of data behind all of the transactions that customers do on a daily basis in cards. And that's where the power of our ability to personalize for customer really comes into play. Shortly before the pandemic, TD had launched Amazon Shop with Points capability for our credit cards. And that was a great example of how we delivered something that was very relevant to the customers at their point of sale in many times unexpected ways. And we found a real uptick in engagement because customers figured out that they had value from the products that they had with us at the point of sale that they then could translate into a form of a reward that then rewards their loyalty. And what was interesting about that was it spoke to the everyday value for customers. And I know we're going to touch on this a little bit in the coming segment, but customers really focusing on value on every day as opposed to only aspirational rewards. And I think that's one of the big transformations that's happened in the loyalty space over the past few years is there's certain segments of the population that still very much want to save up for the big trip and do the dream travel and things like that. But there are many customers, often our younger segments, that feel like that aspiration is so unattainable. They would much rather have value in their cup of coffee on a daily basis, or when they're purchasing something on their Amazon account to be able to throw a couple bucks their way in terms of that value. And so we were really excited about accelerating that trend. It was kind of timely because we launched it right before the pandemic hit. And of course, then it became extra relevant for most customers that had shifted to mostly online purchasing through the early part of 2020.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And Dana, would love to hear about your work and what Mastercard is doing in this space.
Absolutely. And, this is where I'm happy that Katie and I are seeing the same trends. It's a combination, and I completely agree with Katie that it started before the pandemic, but the pandemic has truly accelerated some of these trends that we're seeing, whether it is the shift to digital or whether it is wanting to expand beyond the traditional travel-based loyalty benefits that really has rooted what we think of as loyalty for so long. And I'll be honest, I think that will still be a key foundational pillar and core moving forward, but we know that it is going to expand significantly. And that is one of the things that we really think will stay beyond COVID, but was accelerated throughout the pandemic. And so from our standpoint, we have somewhat shifted quite a few of our services to really align around those everyday benefits, as well as starting to add more benefits beyond the world of travel. And so we're seeing a real need, both from cardholders as well as from our standpoint, issuers and banks, wanting to be able to offer their customers benefits in the verticals of things like health and wellness, right? And that's a trend that we don't see going away. And health and wellness runs the gamut, right? You have very, very functional medical health, telehealth services, things like that became increasingly important during the pandemic that we added through our insurance and assurance products around the world, all the way down to fitness memberships, which we've also added right through partnerships in different regions, given how segmented that industry is around the world. And of course, everything in the middle with mindfulness. And so health and wellness is absolutely a trend that we see continuing, along with, that the shift to digital. And that's where a lot of, as Katie was saying, those everyday benefits come in. And so whether it is things like grocery delivery and helping people, especially at the beginning, figure out how they could get deliveries, how they could get services. In that instance, we actually transformed our traditional travel and concierge product, our travel and lifestyle services product, away from travel, which wasn't happening, to really help people with where can I get tested, what doctor is open, what grocery stores are doing delivery, things that truly mattered to our cardholders, all the way through to our Mastercard intelligent promotions. And what we're doing with our promotions platform right now, just as Katie said, it might not be about the $1,000 airfare or even the $800 hotel room. It's, let me buy 3 cups of coffee and then get a discount, or using the insights that we have. I know that you've purchased 3 cups of coffee. Now here's, an offer for this from a change behavior perspective. And so we're really looking holistically, both on what we could do to serve our customers and their customers, our cardholders, but then moving forward, what we see will continue hopefully after the pandemic.
That's amazing to hear. And one thing that at least I can derive from your conversations is you truly understand the context of your users, and while you maintain their privacy, you actually help them with what they need based on the situation that they are in. We all remember, a few years ago, the term digital personalization was mostly about adapting the user interface, let's say, on a digital channel. So now the fact that you're truly understanding the needs of your customers, the context of your customers, respecting their privacy, but also adapting these services for what they need, where they are, and their situation is definitely an area that I think it's growing, and it's amazing that your institutions are leading that. Before I go to the next question, anything else, maybe Katie or Dana, you want to add to this, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the questions that the audience had for you.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Hossein, that the other trend that I think is very topical to this particular conversation is the personalization of brands. Mm-hmm. And the trend, which is about customers being able to identify the brands that are important to them, versus we've articulated the brands that are the products around which we're going to build. And therefore you decide, are you going to have 9 cards in your wallet because you like these 9 brands? And the trend in loyalty is to try and actually get to a more flexible, choice-based brand offering that's relevant, so that what I offer to my 21-year-old son in terms of brand looks very different from the brands that I might choose.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
And Katie,
please go ahead.
No, Katie, I was just going to say that, you know, and as we look at it, creating those meaningful customer relationships, in both top down as well as bottoms up, right? The push and the pull really hinges on driving that relevance, and having our end users want to engage with us is absolutely core to that. And that personalization doesn't necessarily mean anymore, right? A targeted email marketing campaign, right, like it did before. It really is trying to take a look back on what those true drivers are of loyalty for not only each brand, but right, as we were talking about payment methods. And so it really is this really nice back and forth. And so in addition to the personalization, the other thing that we talk about a lot is, right, this is a time to be active, not be passive. And so that's the other aspect that we're really thinking about in terms of how do we help identify those moments in the customer journey, providing those like surprises, spontaneous moments that then get the engagement back as well. So
yeah, that's a really important point around engagement, because I think if your personalization isn't relevant, you lose the audience in the conversation. And getting it wrong can have a real cost to that loyalty relationship. And so it's a very fine line to thread. And we've talked a little bit about that. Like, how do you use the data for meaningful and relevant communications where the customers want them without overstepping?
That's amazing. The other observations that I have had, and my team working with a number of financial institutions, including yours, is the important role of cards and loyalty on how it is changing the internal aspect of that financial institution. You may add to this because you're way more familiar than I am, but when I looked at the anatomy of a financial institutions in the past, we had cards, we had wealth, we had lending, and even in many cases, these organizations had their own CTOs and their own governance. One area that I'm seeing becoming more and more interesting is how the card and the programs attached to it is bringing more efficiency, operational efficiency, business efficiency within the organization. Examples that I can share with you. We now have examples that when a customer receives a mortgage offer from the bank, using data and digital assets, automatically their card will become eligible for additional points when they buy merchandise related to home improvements. So this is very interesting, not just for the end user, because the mortgage is no longer about the interest rates and terms, although that's very important, but it's also quickly become an experience for the user across other channels, including cards. So I'm curious to hear from you that, is this also a trend that you're seeing? How do you see your work, especially when it comes to cards and loyalty, is also changing the productivity and efficiency in your overall organization and bringing these units closer. I think it's interesting to hear from Katie. I mean, you are in a very large leading financial institution, and I think, Dana, you have an opportunity to work with many issuers around the world. So I'm curious to hear that. Maybe we can start with Dana first.
You know, absolutely. I think, you know, from our standpoint, what we are seeing is just more partnership, right? More partnership across the organization. Because while, of course, we are committed, right, to the ethical and responsible use of the data that we have across our business, it's really what we do with the data in terms of how we partner with our customers, and more importantly, the insights that are generated from that is the value add here. In order to do that, we talk a lot at Mastercard about whole bank loyalty, right? And how you view someone not as a card, not as a mobile payment wallet, not as just a mortgage, right? But it is this whole customer view or cardholder view that is truly important, because someone could be incredibly profitable in one and not the other. And yet every single touch point matters, as we go back, Katie, to what we were talking about at the very beginning with engagement. And so something might be a very daily engagement, but be quote unquote low profitability. But if you lose that profitability, your high profitability touch segment might be gone. And knowing each of those segments might be different for each demographic, each segment, each product, and even at each bank or each customer from our standpoint. And so we really do think about whole bank loyalty and work with our customers to gather insights and to develop and create insights, and then reflective actions based on those insights. And going back to what's important, what are the objectives? Because at the end of the day, it does all need to tie back. And so we take that very, very seriously, Hossein, in terms of what it's doing internally within our own organization. I would just say we're all working more closely together, which I love. And so we are breaking down walls, traditional silos, the way that we have been, as well as just the way we've organized ourselves, whether it be through segments, through verticals. There's just more sharing internally in dialogue, which I truly value. Katie, are you seeing the same?
Thank you.
I was going to say that, that really resonates with me. Most of the corporations are struggling with how do you get beyond the silos to look across at the whole customer. I think the customers have the same perspective. When they're dealing with the bank, they expect us to know all of their relationships with them. They're not thinking, oh, well, I'm dealing with TD Wealth, or now I'm talking to TD Insurance. They expect that there is connectivity in terms of the relationships that we have with them. And so part of what we're doing at TD, it's kind of nicely segues into the role that I'm in now, which is organizing ourselves from a customer lens. So the customer engagement platforms incorporates all of the touch points with a customer, regardless of segment, regardless of north, south of the border, across the enterprise, in all of our marketing and assets, all the way through the buying experiences for customers. And similarly, we have a servicing platform that is organized around the customer end to end. And so that's one of the ways that we're trying to help connect the dots. So we come to the customer as a whole bank, or as a, here's what I know about you and your needs across, and how we create that consistent experience for customers.
That's amazing. And to an end user, usually when you talk about in a generic fashion about programs around cards and loyalty programs, the first thing that comes into mind is travel and airlines. I mean, I think all of us can use a bit of that these days. So I'm curious that as you're thinking about the future of such programs, do you see that travel is continuing to be a prominent element of loyalty programs, and perhaps how would they adapt? Dana has done some amazing work with Starwood. TD has some amazing prominent travel and airline partners. So I'm curious to know your view on, okay, if you really want to build this kind of set of layers of loyalty programs around cards. We have seen different ones, but travel continues to be a main one. How do you see that changing? And what are the other areas that perhaps are untapped? And now with the availability of data and convergence of the industry, with the bank being a hub, we can now expect to emerge in the next couple of years. Maybe we start with Katie now.
Sure. Well, we've definitely seen pent-up demand for travel, which is completely expected. I think all of us want to get to the place where we're beyond having to think about our safety and just getting back to being in person together. Omicron's making it difficult right now to get to that place, but we are hopeful that we'll figure out a way to live with this going forward. So it's still definitely going to be a very prominent piece of how customers think about where and how they want to be rewarded for their loyalty. And likewise, you know, you referenced, we have a pretty big partnership with Air Canada here in Canada, and the Aeroplan program has gone beyond travel to think about the whole experience, not only the travel experience, but everyday ways to reward yourselves. And that's very much aligned with how we're thinking about loyalty, and talks about that continuum, because for some customers, they do want to aspire to travel rewards, and some want to see their rewards work for them every single day.
Amazing. Thank you. Dana?
Absolutely. And Katie, we're seeing the exact same thing. You know, for us, it's always been about choice, well-being, and experience for our cardholders. And, you know, obviously, as Katie said, underpinned with this layer of safety and security, no matter what, which is now even more important, whether that is in travel or in everyday sort of benefits. Look, I like to say travel is one of those passion areas, right? The world of culture, as I call it. And whether it's sports, music, entertainment, fashion, fitness, beauty, culinary, pick one. People love to talk about it, right? Yeah, you can hear, I love travel, I get excited about it. And so I don't think that will ever go away. At least, hopefully it won't. You know, that would be my hope, is that we can all get back to this soon. But we also know that the pandemic has brought about other changes that might continue. And the other really interesting thing is, if you look at loyalty behavior around the world, in some countries, people might traditionally be savers, and hoarders. In other countries, people are immediate spenders, right? And it's a $5 constant. And so part of that is also cultural, I believe, but the pandemic has definitely brought on changes. And so I don't think that we're going to see the travel loyalty aspect go away. I just think we're going to see this wonderful expansion of what people are using their loyalty for and what they expect. So whether that's something like pay with points, right? Using your points for alternate measures, whether it's from a loyalty perspective, making sure that you feel like someone has your back, right? With a digital insurance platform or a concierge travel perspective, in terms of someone traveling abroad, not knowing what's going to happen, but I'm going to go with confidence because I know if something does happen, I have a backstop there. And so to me, all of those are aspects of loyalty that just present themselves in different ways, whether it's through points, through peace of mind, all hopefully which drive engagement, which at the end of the day is really how at least we think about loyalty.
That's amazing. Thank you. I would love to ask you a question and understand your thoughts around a capability that Flybits Labs and my R&D team members are building, and it's a trend that we see in the industry, but I know it's more complicated than how some of our R&D colleagues are thinking about. The trend that we are seeing in the market is that banks and financial institutions are truly becoming a hub for co-creation, and they use data and digital as a fabric to enable that. So when you think about a classic financial institutions, they have a number of partnerships across different verticals, from utility companies to telecom operators, to airlines and travel partners. Now, in the past, and when I say in the past, I mean, I'm referring to the classic way that data really was a secondary element. There was a tactical business relationships between these entities. Now, with the power of data, with the advent of open banking, in which customers more and more have a say and ownership in terms of how they want the data to be shared across these institutions, a number of our partners and colleagues are saying, hey, can we actually get closer and closer to the world that rather than the program issuer, the card issuer, or the bank deciding what the benefits are on our cards are, we actually want to have an authoring tool or a curation platform to pick and choose from the partners that are available, and automatically pricing will be adjusted and all that. It's great. It's an interesting concept. But I understand totally that there are a number of restrictions from data sharing, regulations, privacy, complications. I'm curious to hear your view, especially your personal view, in terms of, do you think we are getting closer to that world that the end user or the user of the program can have more control and authority to use data in a creative fashion to define programs? So instead of personalization being top-down, it's bottom-up, defined by the user, and you give them the transparency and the explainability that you want. Maybe we start with Katie as a data question, and then we go to Dana.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept of how you might get to a hub of co-creation. We're probably not fully there yet because of lots of legal restrictions and things like that. But I do believe that open banking is going to create the advent of more of that. We at TD firmly believe that the customer owns their own data and that they should have the right and say and be fully informed on how their data is being used. And so it's our responsibility and our stewardship of that data that I think is particularly concerning when you think about open banking and some of the risks that that may bring. And so as we move into that space, we have to be very cognizant of how to do that in a way that is what customers are expecting and gives them that comfort level. To your question of, do we go as far as give the customers the ability to kind of write the program of what that looks like to them? That is how I'm thinking about the flexibility and choice that I think is where loyalty is going. And so we've been doing a lot of thinking around how do we pick the right partnerships that are relevant to the right number of customers? How do we give the customers that choice that they're looking for to reward themselves in ways that are meaningful and relevant to them without my having to, say, try on a one size fits all, or there's 3 options for you, pick one, but know that there's an infinite number of combinations for any given customer base, and let the data help design that for customers.
Yeah, and I would echo everything that Katie said, and I'm not going to try and say it any differently because she said it so well. But the other aspect I would say is, and I've talked about this. For us, it's really about the insights that we gather from our interactions, and then what we do that, because at the end of the day, we want our cardholders and our customers to be able to interact with them in the way that serves them the best, because at the end of the day, that is who we serve. And Mastercard, right, we kind of have 2, right? We have the traditional customers and then the end user cardholders from that perspective. And, as Katie said, it's about realizing that not everyone is one size fits all, and more to that who I am today and what I want right now actually might be different 6 months from now, a year from now. And so how do I recognize that? And if I can have the insights to maybe predict what that person might need or do and offer that up, phenomenal. But at the end of the day, how do we allow that choice to be served up, and then to our cardholder to take that appropriate action to do that? And so, it's something similar to Katie that she was talking about with TD, that at Mastercard, we're I don't want to say it's not struggling with, it's more get excited about how do we end up getting there. But there are a lot of conversations that have to be had before we're there.
Thank you. That was great. My last question is more around, you know, of course, anyone in the cards space always looked at two worlds. I have the offline card, and they call it the card present scenarios, and my plastic card is always with me. And then we also thought about separate set of use cases in a card not present scenario, and especially with the advent of digital wallets. Now, one thing that we talked about, which is this ability of cards to create convergence, not just around business units, but also between our offline world and the online world, because that's what defines our situation. When you think about, I mean, some people call it the O2O capabilities, online to offline capabilities. When you think about the future of programs, for sure there are programs that can purely be digital, you know, especially when you talk about points and incentives. How do you see this convergence of the online and offline world coming together? I mean, scenarios like travel is great for that, because I don't want to be distracted by my phone. I want my phone to be a concierge making the most of my travel. I'm curious to see if that world still stays card present, card not present, and with everything that is happening, is just becoming one type of a unified concierge capability around these loyalty programs. Maybe we start with you, Dana.
You know, absolutely, Hossein. And I think we're all looking to get to that similar end state. You know, the role of digital for us was a key, or is a key point in our most latest Mastercard Economics Institute report on the economy 2022. One of the key data points we saw, you know, there was a 20%, or rather 20% of the shift that we saw to digital through COVID, we absolutely expect here to stay, not going anywhere, right? A great example, predominantly from a boomer's perspective, I think we've all seen this and gone through it in one way, shape, or form. You know, my in-laws never would have ever ordered groceries through an app, right? And online. And it was a hurdle to get there. But now that they're used to it, I do believe that some of that behavior will absolutely continue. The pendulum will 100% swing back. Return to stores will happen. But there are certain shifts, especially within certain demographic and psychographic groups that were forced into behavior that will 100% continue moving forward. And that does also, in my mind, have a huge impact on how we think about loyalty programs and how they're designed and executed. And so, you know, from that standpoint, whether the rise of digital will affect and or help with, right, supply chain issues that we're seeing that is affecting the world of loyalty, right, crypto as a growing emerging trend that we're really keeping an eye on, and also how we reduce the friction points, I would say, right? So whether it's buy online, pick up in store, whether it's reserve online or buy online but pay in store, right? There are all sorts of different elements that we're watching here that we know the shift to digital is going to have a significant impact on moving forward.
Great, thank you. Katie, anything you want to add?
I think that I was reflecting on kind of early days of credit card usage, and I may be dating myself. Some on the call may not remember the days when you would hand your plastic over and they'd run it through the machine, you know?
Yeah.
And then you'd have to sign on the triple carbon copy, and then that would get sent in with the batch of end-of-day closure receipts. And the process might end up at the bank 2 days later, and you would see it on your statement. Yeah. And to go from that point, and we were probably still there, you know, 20, 30% of the time in the early 90s. It wasn't that long ago when we were still in that environment of cards as a means to pay, to a digital environment that melds the in-person and the digital experience. And I think that, we can't force these things on customers. Customers adopt it because they see value in it, and they see, convenience in, why do I carry my phone around with me all the time? I couldn't have imagined having a phone that's small enough to be in a pocket, that has a computing power bigger than my first PC. That it just wasn't part of my lexicon, 20 years ago. And now if I'm out of the house 2 minutes and I don't have my phone, I know, because I can't start my car. Right. And you think about that integration of your digital experience in your everyday life. Dana referred to purchasing online, paying in store, picking up in store, or arranging deliveries of things where I would always go to the grocery store before, but now I see convenience in ordering and having it sent to the house. So that's the reality, that we've been on that journey for the last, probably we've seen the evolution over the past 5 to 7 years. And then it skyrocketed during the pandemic for reasons beyond any of our expectations, for sure. And so I think that those of us in the payment space or in financial services, in those economies, we have to be thinking about that acceleration and then crafting products to meet customers' needs in that new reality. And you can't design for one or the other. You need to think about it as one engagement ecosystem that includes digital, that includes the data that we have about customers wherever they happen to be, and then finding ways to deliver experiences for customers in those moments of truth that are happening sometimes online and sometimes offline.
Perfect. Thank you. That was great. This concludes the the conversational aspect of our webinar. We have some questions from the attendees. Bring them on, but it's I address the ones that are here. I can address it through the Flybits lens and what we have seen, and other attendees can comment as well. We have a question from an anonymous attendee asking about the management of data, ownership of data, especially when it comes to PII data. It's a great question. I'm going to share my view on Flybits and also what we see in the industry. One thing that is happening now, as if you think about open banking, in addition of being terms of becoming a regulation type of a regime, it's also becoming a catalyst to really introduce new business models that are more privacy preserving. So you can always do things such as, especially with new algorithmic capabilities, with new data sharing capabilities from a technical side, instead of just going and co-locating data in one location, you now have the ability to decentralize the data, encrypt the data. When you move it around, you can use tokenization. In many cases, you can use distributed ledgers and blockchain. So in a nutshell, I think we have reached a level of maturity in the industry that we have a good transactional medium to handle data in a privacy preserved fashion. On top of that, I think the role of legal contracts are becoming more and more important. That similar to how you go and deposit a check at a bank, and that's your money, but you trust the bank to manage that financial asset on your behalf. We believe the same regime is happening with almost any bank that we talk to, including the ones that we work with, that they understand that's your data. You are trusting the bank to manage it or even invest it for you. Now, up until here, it's all algorithmic work, distributed systems work, and governance. Another thing that you mentioned, which is very interesting, is now the role of design in building such systems. Because now if you have user interfaces that are built around transparency, around explainability, around auditability, to truly create that persuasive interface for the user that, hey, these are all your data, they are secure, they may even be on your local phone using edge computing rather than in the cloud. Now, I give you the ability to use your bank or financial institution to share that data as a token with partners in exchange of the value. Do you now want to participate in that co-creation with your banking partner? It's happening now. And a lot of institutions, including our partners, are doing that. They take their data privacy extremely serious, both security and privacy. But the unique thing that I'm seeing now is that instead of just locking it down, they are coming up with means to empower the user with the data assets that they have. So to answer your questions, for sure on the transactional medium and on the algorithmic side, but perhaps a good takeaway for some of our attendees is the importance of design, user experience, building around transparency when you have predictive interfaces and contextual interfaces. And instead of building and designing in silos, building interdisciplinary product teams that they bring all of these skill sets together. So you asked a very good question. And the second one is also related. I answered that, and then we can see if there are any other questions. The question is about, instead of making such recommendations around programs tacticals, we all receive push notifications or email that are irrelevant. Again, the question will go back on the design, that can we actually show possibilities of offers to an end user and let them choose, and based on that choice, we can understand that preference later on. Absolutely. Again, it goes back to what I shared earlier, the role of design and how important it's becoming, especially when we are going through an open data era. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, anything Dana and Katie, you want to add, please do so. If not, we can proceed with the rest of the questions.
I think you hit it pretty well.
Awesome, perfect. I think just want to make sure we have any other questions. Not at the moment. I'll just want to check again to make sure we are not ignoring our attendees' questions, but seems not. We addressed it. So with that, I just wanted to thank you who are attending our webinar. I know it's closer to the holiday and a very busy time, so we really appreciate your interest in joining us today. And I especially want to thank my guests, Dana Rosenberg at Mastercard and Katie Boschardt at TD, to join me today. They are both leaders in their industry. Their organizations are our partners and doing some amazing work for their users. So thank you again for joining us. This webinar is recorded. For those of you who are attending, you should receive a copy of the recording. And if you think we can help or you want to share your ideas with us, please reach out. With that, thank you again, and I wish you a great holiday season ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.